Hello students. So last lecture we have ended at this point where we have discussed about the types of pollinating agents like abiotic agents and biotic agents, and we have identified the subtypes of both of this. Now in today's lecture we will learn about this abiotic and biotic factors in more detail. So first let us start with the abiotic factors or abiotic agents. The first abiotic agent is wind. So the plant which are using wind as a pollinating agent, they are termed as anemophilous plant, and the condition is called as anemophily, right? It is most primitive or simple type, and it is more common among the abiotic pollinations, right? So whatever plants they are using abiotic agents for pollination purpose, wind is more common than the other. The pollen grains are very small in these plants. So in anemophilous plants, the pollen grains are very small. They are of lightweight, they are smooth walled, and they are non-sticky, or we can say they are dry. Basically, this means the pollen grains don't have pollen kit material on their surface, right? Just to remind you, we have studied about pollen kit under tapetal cell secretions while studying the structure of anther, right? So this pollen kit material, which is secreted by the tapetal cell, it gets surrounded around the pollen grain and makes it sticky, but that is not observed in the flowers of anemophilous plant, right? And as the pollen kit is absent, the pollen grain remains dry. The stamens of flowers are well exposed and possess long filament so that pollens are easily dispersed into the wind currents, right? So if you remember, while discussing the types of anthers, we have discussed one type called versatile type of anther, right? So versatile anther, it is mainly observed in anemophilous plants or plants which are using wind as a pollinating agent. So here you can observe this individual stamen having anther at the terminal end. They are well exposed so that whenever they follow dehiscence process, the anthers will easily deposited into the air current and carried away. The stigma of anemophilous flower is large, hairy or feathery, or we can say brushy, and it is very sticky due to the mucilaginous secretions onto it, and this mucilaginous secretions which makes the stigma sticky helps in trapping the pollen grains easily. So as you can observe in this diagram, this is the picture of female flower having this feathery stigma, right, which can trap the pollen grains easily. So this is more clear picture. You can observe here this particular region, it is having the feathery stigma so that the pollen grains can get trapped easily. The flowers of anemophilous plants are small, colorless and nectarless, as they don't need to attract the animals for pollination. They don't need to have such adaptations. Generally, only one ovule is present in ovary, and the examples include for anemophilous plants are maize, wheat, bamboo, coconut, date palm, etc. Next abiotic agent for pollination is water. When the pollination is supported by water, it is called hydrophily. Pollination by water is quite rare and is limited to about only 30 genera, and among these 30 genera, most of them they belongs to monocot types. If you consider the characteristic features of the flower, the stigma of the flower is long, sticky, and unwettable as it is developing inside the water. It should be having certain coverings around it which will keep the water away from it. The pollen grains of hydrophilous plants, they are lightweight so that they can float and easily carried away with the water currents. They are ribbon like, which will again helping in passive transportation, and usually surrounded by mucilaginous covering. The pollination in hydrophily is of two types based on the location of pollination. So there are two possibilities. One possibility, the pollination will takes place on the water surface. So whenever the pollination is taking place on the water surface, it is termed as epihydrophily. And here you can observe this example where this is a male plant having staminate flowers, means it is producing only male gametes. This is female flower, right? So in this female flower, the flower is attached with the spiral stalk, as you can observe over here. So this stalk will help in lifting the female flower or pistillate flower up to the water surface. So whenever this flower is reaching to the water surface, it is ready to receive the pollen grains, and the pollen grains released by this male flower, they will reach to this stigma of female flower. The fertilization will takes place, and the female flower will again get retracted back to the below water surface, right? So this is the example of epihydrophily, which is mainly observed in the plants like Vallisneria. The other pollination site possible is below the water surface, and whenever the pollination is taking place below water surface, it is termed as hypohydrophily. Right? So in hypohydrophilous plants, the pollination process or transfer of pollen grain will take place below the water surface. So as you can observe in this diagram, this is a male flower which is having staminate type of flowers and producing pollen grains. This pollen grains, as I mentioned, they are ribbon like, right? So they will passively getting transported along with the water current to the female plant, and female plant bears pistillate types of flowers with this stigma, right? So the pollen grains will readily getting transported to the stigma, and all this process is happening below the water surface, and that's why it is termed as hypohydrophily, right? So these are the two types of hydrophily: epihydrophily and hypohydrophily. The examples of plant which are following hypohydrophily, they are Hydrilla and Zostera, while Vallisneria, it is the example of epihydrophily. Next, biotic agents. A majority of angiosperms use a range of animals as pollinating agents, and the pollination by animals, it is generally termed as zoophily. Honeybees, butterflies, beetles, wasps, ants, moths, birds, these birds, particularly the small birds like hummingbirds and sunbird, and bats are common pollinating agents. However, in some angiosperms, Larger animals like primates, arboreal rodents. Arboreal means tree dwelling animals, right? So rodent example which is having tree dwelling habitat is squirrel, or even reptiles like lizards and snakes also have been reported as pollinating agents in several plants. Depending on to the type of pollinating animals, whether it is insect, bird, or reptile, or snake, or snail, this zoophily is termed differently. So let us understand those terms and few examples of them. First, entomophily. Entomophily means pollination by insects, and these are the most common biotic agents of pollination. Among insects, bees are the most common insects which acts as pollinating agents, and they cause nearly 80% of insect pollinations. The characteristics or adaptations shown by Entomophilous plants includes flowers of such plants are large, conspicuous. Conspicuous means clearly visible, brightly colored and attractive. Most of the Entomophilous plants are ornamental plants, right? If the flowers are small sized, they are clustered into inflorescence. For example, as you can observe in sunflower. The plants produce fragrance or specific smell, and also produces nectar to attract the insects. The pollen grains of such entomophilous plants possess rough and spiny exine with pollen kit material on it. Hence, the pollen grains become sticky and they adhere firmly onto the insect body. Fall smelled or fall odored flowers are produced by such plants where the pollinating agents are flies and beetles. Now, in order to achieve higher rate of pollination, these plants need to reward the insect visitors so that they would visit them frequently and increase the possibility of pollination. So, such rewards mainly include nectar, pollen, in certain cases safe place to lay eggs. So if you observe the plants amorphophallus, in amorphophallus the flowers are having size of around 6 feet, right? So such larger flowers serve as safe hideout for insects, and that's why the insects may frequently visit them. Similar relationship is also observed in between a species of moth which lays eggs in the ovary of yucca plant, right? And both this moth and yucca plant, they can't complete their life cycle without each other. Now there is one term called pollen or nectar robbers. So robbery means simply stealing, right? So there are some insects which consume nectar from the flowers, but they are not helping in pollination process, right? So all such insects, they are termed as pollen robbers or nectar robbers, right? Now examples of antemophilous plants mainly includes salvia, ficus, jasmine, bougainvillea, etc. All these plants are having bright colored or flowers, or the flowers which are producing good fragrance. So other biotic agents of pollination include birds. So whenever birds are acting as pollinating agents, it is termed as ornithophily, right? And the examples of plants includes bombex, agave, and callistemon. Then bats can also act as pollinating agents, and whenever bats are involved, it is termed as Cheiropterophily. The plants which are pollinated by bats includes Adansonia and Anthocephalus. Snails can also bring about the pollination process, and it is termed as Malacophaly. So arum lilies and Arisema, they are the plants where snails are carrying the pollen grains. Snakes, whenever snakes are involved, it is termed as Ophiophily, and the plant Santalum and Michelia. Santalum is sandalwood, right? So these two plants, they are mainly observed to be pollinated by snakes. So these are several other examples of biotic agents and related terms. And there is one more concept termed as outbreeding devices, right? So outbreeding devices simply means the feature of plants which discourage self pollination and encourage cross pollination, right? We already have discussed such features in adaptations related to cross pollination or xenogamy or allogamy, so we are not again discussing them. So for understanding of outbreeding devices or the features of plants for encouraging the cross pollination, you just refer our previous lecture where we have discussed about the allogamy or xenogamy, and we have discussed the adaptations related to xenogamy. Now next part, which is very important, it is pollen pistil interaction. All the events from deposition of pollen grain on the stigma to the entry of pollen tube into the embryo sac are referred as pollen pistil interaction. It is a dynamic process and involves pollen recognition. So stigma, it is having this ability to recognize correct type of pollen grain. Cross pollination is always a chance based phenomena, and it doesn't guarantee the transfer of right type of pollen always. So right type of pollen means compatible pollen, right? The wrong type of pollen may be from other species, or it may be from the same plant, but it is self incompatible, right? And if such wrong type of pollen lands on the stigma, the pistil rejects it by preventing its germination on stigma, or by preventing growth of pollen tube in style. And this is because the pistil has the ability to recognize the compatible or incompatible pollen grains. If pollen is right type, the pistil accepts it and promotes post-pollination events, which will ultimately leads to fertilization. The ability of pistil to recognize the pollen grain is due to certain chemical components present in pollen grain, which interacts with those chemicals which are present in pistil. So, recent scientific studies have led to identification of some of the pollen and pistil components and the mechanism by which they interact and induce the post-pollination events. So by this way, compatible pollen grain germinates on stigma and a pollen tube comes out through the germ pore. The content of pollen grain move into the pollen tube and it grows through the tissues of stigma and then enters into the style. As we already have studied in previous section, in most of the angiosperms, almost 60% pollen grains are being shed at the two-celled stage. That is, the pollen grain is containing a vegetative cell and a generative cell. In such case, the generative cell divides and form two male gametes during the growth of pollen tube inside the style. But in case of remaining 40% angiosperms, the pollen grains are shed at three cell stage, that is, it is containing vegetative cell and two male gametes. So in such cases, three nuclei will enter into the pollen tube upon germination of pollen. After reaching at ovary, pollen tube enters into the embryo sac through the micropyle in most of the cases, but in few flowering plants the pollen tube may enter through chalazal site or through integuments. Then it enters in one of the synergids through the filiform apparatus and bursts to release male gametes, and this leads to the process of fertilization of egg cell within the embryo sac. Now in vitro pollen germination. So this pollen pistil interaction, if it is positive, then the pollen tube will grow through the pollen grain and that leads to fertilization. So growth of pollen tube we can actually observe with some experiment, right? So this experiment is also termed as hanging drop method for understanding the process of pollen germination. Pollen germination can be studied by dusting pollen on a glass slide containing a drop of 10% sugar solution and some salts. After 15 to 30 minutes, the pollen tubes will observed to come out of pollen grains. This is an actual microscopic image of pollen grains at various timeline. So this is we can consider as 0 minute, right? So after few minutes we can observe the pollen grains, they are developing the pollen tube, right? After several minutes again the size of pollen tube is increased, and here in last image you can observe the large sized pollen tubes being emerged from the pollen grains, right? So this experiment you will be doing in lab, but I will try to post a video related to this experiment and I hope you will like it. Next, artificial hybridization. So artificial hybridization is a method of crop improvement in which crosses are made between different plant varieties or different species of plant in order to combine the desirable characters in a single superior variety. This is also termed as plant breeding experiments, and it is generally achieved by emasculation and bagging techniques, right? So under this plant breeding experiments, first suitable parental plants, that is the plants from which we are going to select the male flower and female flower, or male gamete or female gamete, they are selected. Then emasculation and bagging is followed to prevent self and undesired pollination. So first let us learn about emasculation. Emasculation is removal of anthers from female plant flower bud before the anther follows dehiscence process, right? So before the anthers get mature, they are removed, and that method is called emasculation. So here you can observe the anthers are being removed with the help of forceps, right? So in this plant, as there will be no more anthers, self pollination is not possible. The another technique is called bagging technique. So bagging is covering of emasculated flower with a bag to prevent contamination of stigma with unwanted pollen grains. So here in this image you can observe the flowers are being bagged. They are covered with a bag, and that's why the undesired pollen grains will not settle on the stigma of such flowers, right? So once the bagging is completed, later on, the plant breeders, they wait for the maturation of female plant flower, and after that, dusting of pollen grain is done from the desired variety plant anther onto the bagged flower stigma, and rebagging is done. After fertilization, the fruits are allowed to develop to obtain the seeds. So this is how, by artificial method, we can induce the cross pollination between the desirable crop varieties to produce a superior plant variety. So that's it for this lecture. In next lecture, we will we will study about the process of double fertilization and embryogenesis. Till then, goodbye.